And this is going to be the all Damian Lillard edition, because here's what he had to say about the credibility of that 2020 Lakers championship. Take a listen.
I felt like that was the best version of me to that point. So, like, I don't understand what people mean when they talk about it in credit. I feel like it would have been hard to win that because people was fresh. I feel like based off of how my body felt and what I knew our experience was, like, we had never see a more fresh version of, like, the opposition than we did at that time.
All right, so as someone who spent 107 days, but who was counting, I was every single one of them in the bubble, I agree with Dame. What do you think about his reaction to the 2020 title?
Hell yes, he's right. And every team had to play under the same conditions. That were they ideal? Were they different? You know, that's just reality. And the only reason that this is a talking point is because the Lakers and LeBron James were the ultimate winners of that championship. And the Lakers are the most popular team in the league. LeBron, arguably the greatest player of all time. What comes with that is an entire industrial complex of people who want to tear your accomplishments down. If any other team won this title, we would never be talking about it again. And I can tell you this. People within other teams, Milwaukee, the Clippers, who had title hopes that year, don't look back on it and say, who cares, it's the bubble, it doesn't really count. They look back on it and say, man, we lost a precious chance at the thing that we all play for, the championship. So Dame is right.
Yeah,
the people who handled the bubble the best are the ones who won. Right? The Heat handled the bubble the best. The Lakers handled the bubble the best. Like, there were teams that just could not be away from home and be in that environment for that long. And so I think Dame, he's right. That was some of the best basketball of his career. I mean, I think his series against Oklahoma City a couple of years earlier was right up there. But yeah.
Dame averaged
Dame time.
37 and 10 in the bubble, Chiney. Like, that's the kind of hooping we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an argument for guys like Anthony Davis who have dealt with nicks and knacks to say, all right, the bubble allowed you a little rest before that run. But if you talk to any player, which at that time I was on the Players Association in the WNBA, what they were going through to put themselves up to the task of playing, and then also the advocacy, and then also competing for a championship, that ring still rings. It still rings. It still blings.
That ring still rings. Dame was the MVP of the bubble because we had that. Blah, blah, blah. All right, let's move on our Hot Summer Mike's tour. He also made some comments about Kevin Durant joining the 73-win Warriors. That was back in 2016. Here's what he had to say.
I'd never do nothing like that. I'll lose every year before I go.
So you're trying to say what KD did, you wouldn't do that?
If Kevin Durant,
I've
said this plenty of times before. I think KD is obviously he's one of the greatest players of all time, but if I was in his shoes, I wouldn't have done that personally.
Ramona, I know you have some strong thoughts on this one.
I mean, look, he wants to join the Miami Heat, and they just went to the finals 2 out of 3 years. That Warriors team, though, with 73 wins, you can say that about Kevin if you want. They played beautiful basketball. And I also think this idea, like, it was the Warriors and the super team. It's a convenient thing to say now. Kevin has been on a lot of different teams, and part of Damian Lillard's brand is that he has been the loyal guy. He has been the guy who stayed, who stuck it out, who planted himself there and decided to try and make the best of it. And so, okay, you can say that now, but he's kind of trying to join a team like that right now.
I mean, the Warrior the dynasty, different level maybe than the Miami. But Chiney, go ahead. Your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's different when the team you're joining has been a dynasty and you're joining that. I think everyone knows what the criticism with Kevin Durant was.
Yeah.
But I don't think Dame means as much shade. Every basketball player would say, like, that's not the goal when you start playing. You want to be that loyal person. You want to be able to build with one franchise forever. And by the time you get to our age, which we're all sort of in the same ballpark, you start thinking, all right, legacy is a big factor for me. I may have to move. Now, the extreme is doing what KD did and moving to the dynasty, but I don't think they're afraid of this foreign idea of moving. I think there's a separation between the two.
Go ahead, Zach. We're making eyes at each other.
The Warriors, we're using the D word here pretty liberally. The Warriors had won one title when Kevin Durant joined them. They were not a dynasty yet and now have kind of become one of these Spursy dynasties where they win a lot over a long, long span. But look, yes, he wants to join the Miami Heat. I do think there's a difference between a 3-star team, which we've seen over and over again in the NBA, and what the Warriors became, which was an unprecedented 4-star team because of the cap spike. That's the only reason that ever happened. I do think there's a difference. But are we paying Dame for all this content? Dame is like, how many podcasts did he do?
Also, he wasn't supposed to be able to say anything, right? He was like, there was like a fine at the end.
Hey.
And it's amazing how much he was able to say without
And guess what?
saying anything.
He wasn't even done. There is more. I'm just going to get out of his way because he was asked who he thinks is the best point guard in the league right now.
I don't think nobody is better than me. Like I don't think nobody's better than me when I get on the court. That's probably my greatest strength is I believe what I believe, and that's what it is.
You think you're the best point guard in the NBA right now?
Yeah.
Janae, what do you think?
You saw my affect change. The compilation of these 3 sound bites are like Dame to a T.
Yeah.
So he may not be literally saying what he actually is thinking, but you're getting his mentality. Hey, I'm a loyal guy. Hey, I don't think anybody as a point guard is better than me. So I'm not reading too much into it, but I am here for Dame because he knows how to control his own narrative.
You know when it's serious? It's when Janae's eye starts going like this.
Like that.
I mean, but the truth, he's not far off on this statement. Dame is a fantastic. I mean, who are we putting in this category? Is this Dame versus Steph? Dame versus Shea? Dame, Luka, but are we calling Luka a point guard? Is he a point forward? LeBron James? Like, the definition of point guard is very different, right?
Point Giannis.
Yeah, point Giannis. I mean, but I don't know. I think he's in this conversation. I voted for him for All-NBA, even though he sat out the last 17 games of the year. He's certainly in that conversation.
There's no question he's in the conversation.
I mean,
he was on my All-NBA team, too. He's been on my MVP ballot, Dame, multiple times. He's in the conversation. I would disagree with him. I would put Steph over him, maybe Luka, but he's in the conversation. And what really matters is, to Sinead's point, it's that he believes it. What else is he supposed to do? That's how you go out there and become Damian Lillard, a top 75 all-time player, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you do it.
Well, and the other piece that matters most urgently is that is the player that if the Miami Heat get, what were we talking about last season? What were they short on last season? All of those strengths.
Three-point shooting.
Yep, that Damian Lillard knows that he has. He would bring them to Miami and potentially put them in another stratosphere. All right, welcome back. So Zion Williamson, he only played in 29 games last season. And when he was in uniform, the Pelicans, they were actually a top 3 team out west. But after his hamstring injury in New Orleans, they just tumbled down the conference standings all the way to 10th. And then in July, remember Zion said this. He said, quote, "There are a lot of things I could have done better. I didn't. I'm in the process of fixing those wrongs." And then yesterday, Pelicans Vice President David Griffin, he backed up the work that Zion has been putting in.
You know, he tells everyone publicly that will listen he loves New Orleans and he wants to be here. And he's continuing to do what he says he's going to do. I mean, he was here, and he was in our building more than he had been, and he stayed in the city longer and more often in the off-season, working here on his own than he has. I don't think there's a lot of him that's trying to go elsewhere, which is good. So hopefully he's finding a way to get himself into the right space and, more importantly, the right frame of mind.
So Andrew Lopez, our reporter covering the Pelicans, he jumped on the wildly successful Low Post podcast, and he reported that the expectation is that Zion is going to be ready for the start of the season. But Zach, can I tell you what I was listening to this podcast on my drive in, what made me literally I almost needed to pull over my car when I heard it. Can you guess?
No.
It was that he has only played in 30 games in one season. In one season, Zion Williamson has only played more than 30 games. So it's easy to forget when you hear that how dominant he is when he's actually on the floor. Can you remind us a little bit here, Zach, before we move forward?
Yeah, this dude, when he's on the court, is a one-man top 5 offense in the NBA. He can do literally everything, and he's a fast tank doing all of it, and he can do whatever role you need him to do based on who's available and who's on the court. So if we go to the tape, just 3 fun plays to highlight. If you need him to handle the ball because BI's hurt or whatever, I can just split Joel Embiid and lay the ball in as point Zion. Sure, one-on-one, that's a center, Montrezl Harrell. And it's like he's a little bird feather that just gets shoved out of the way. And if he misses that, he's going to put it back in. You need me to set a screen for CJ McCollum because we got a bunch of ball handlers? I can do that. Who's going to stop me? Interesting, in this clip, there's no other big man on the floor. Zion at center is something we haven't seen that much of. Maybe we won't see that much of it, but it is a weapon for them. He, by himself, is an elite NBA offense. He can do literally everything within the three-point arc at an elite level. There is no answer for him when he's on the floor.
So CJ McCollum Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram have played in, what, 10 games
10
together?
games, 172 minutes.
10 games together, 172 minutes. Zach knows that off the top of his head. Shanae, that's what we're able to see from Zion. They're pretty good when those three guys play together. What do you need to see from him to make you feel good about, oh, yeah, this is a team that's, what, $2.9 million over the luxury tax and needs to actually start to win some games now?
Well, what I also know on the top of my head is that when Zion is out there in 29 games, he averaged 26 points, shot 61% from the field goal. And mind you, the Pelicans were 17-12, which is pretty good. I think with their core unit out there and Zion healthy, a good goal is for him to be a candidate for awards, meaning he's played in 65 games. He's played 20 minutes each. If that is the case, maybe not the expectation of 82, but say, hey, Zion, our goal is for you to be have the ability to be award eligible, and then you keep the pieces around him. The Pelicans will be so happy with that. So I'm impressed that we listened to the Low Post pod because I haven't been on there in a while, Zach.
Oh,
Yeah, you don't text me back.
This
You don't
is the
text me
call
back,
up. She
Shanae.
doesn't text any of us back, Zach.
What are you talking about?
Shanae, we love you.
I love it.
But here's
some
the
good
deal.
shade.
Shanae, you're saying 65 games. I just said it only one season he has played in more than 30, and that was 61 games. So what are the realistic expectations here?
I mean, when David Griffin says we've seen him in our building more this offseason, that's like starting from we never used to see him and now we've seen him a bit, okay?
Yeah.
So that's a good start, but so much of what needs to happen with Zion is that he has to realize it has to come from within. Nobody can tell him what to do. He has to feel this from within his own self and make those changes that he talked about on all the different podcasts he's been on. And that helps. Starting to show up. Be in front of people. Let them see you. Work with the team personnel. Work with teammates who are in the building. That's a really encouraging sign if you're with the Pelicans right now because flat out, Malik, you talked about how many games he's played. It's also just being around. Like when he's had injury recoveries, he was at the Nike headquarters. He last saw offseason in Fort Lauderdale. He's been all over the place except in the building where they can see him. And some of that is them putting people around him that he has a level of trust and a working relationship with. And I think that's all starting to come together. But number one, it has to come from within. And it seems like it might be starting to.
So we're talking all about Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson plays for a team called the New Orleans Pelicans, who also have C.J. McCollum on an extension. He's a veteran. Brandon Ingram is now in the middle of his prime. He's eligible for a Supermax. Jonas Valanciunas is on an expiring contract. He's a veteran. They are built to win now. We can sit here and talk about how many games Zion is going to play, awards, all of that. The Pelicans, they were 18-8 last year in their first 26 games. They're one of like 9 teams in the West where if you wake up in March and they're third in the conference, you wouldn't be surprised. If you wake up in March and they're 11th in the conference, you wouldn't be surprised.
Yep.
There's a lot at stake for them. We can talk about the big fella over and over. This team is built to win today, and they just haven't been able to do it, partly because of his health. But there's a broader team here that's really interesting.
When you say there's a lot at stake, just please remind us what exactly we're talking about here.
Well, we're talking about this team has been in a waiting period for a long time. They put some chips
There's decisions.
to get C.J. McCollum. There's guys that are extension eligible, and there's decisions down the road, including with the draft picks they own from the Milwaukee Bucks via the Drew Holiday trade. Do they put those in play to try to help their team? Now they own a Lakers pick. They own a lot of stuff.
Well, and to your point, as we put up a photo of Zion Williamson working out, I feel like yoked. But I'm with Zach Lowe in the business of Zion Williamson offseason photos, Ben Simmons offseason photos. How are we feeling about those right now, Zach?
I am opting out of the Zion and Ben Simmons social media industrial complex. It's nice. The photos are great. I want to see it on the floor.
NBA